You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. And today, unfortunately, Amber can't join us, but that's okay. She's enjoying some time off with her family, so we wish her well. But I'm really excited to have today's guest on. So before we get started, let me just first quickly say it is Face Equality Week. So if you're new to the podcast or you're new to our social media, all week long we are celebrating Face Equality Week. And this year's theme is My Face is a Masterpiece. So we'll talk more about the theme with today's guest, but Face Equality Week is hosted by Face Equality International, and we're so excited to have on FEI's newest ambassador, Paige Billiot, today. So before I introduce her, I do want to give a quick shout out to today's podcast partner. So today's podcast is powered by one of our fire prevention partners, Telgian. Telgian is committed to providing effective and innovative fire protection, life safety, and security programs. So you can learn more about them by visiting www.telgian.com. So without further ado, today I'm super excited to have on Paige Lauren Billiot. She is a birthmark advocate, model, and producer from Seattle, Washington. Growing up in Las Vegas, she began pursuing her love for acting as a theater major at the Las Vegas Academy of Performing Arts and International Studies. In 2014, she moved to Hollywood to create representation in the film and beauty industry for others who looked like her, facing industry resistance to her unique diversity. Underrated, Paige carved her path on Instagram using makeup, props, and VFX to create her birthmark as a superpower. Her influence has been recognized in many magazines, including some of my favorites like 17, Glamour, and Women's Health, earning her a spot on Glamour's 50 Instagrammers you need to follow right now. When she isn't advocating for her birthmark community, she loves taking her 4 cats on walks in their strollers while expanding her chai tea latte palette and Scooby-Doo collection. So thank you so much, Paige, for joining us today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. So, our podcast, we typically have on burn survivors or caregivers or burn care professionals. So you're obviously not a burn survivor, but you obviously have a facial difference and can relate to our community. So can you just tell us a little bit more about, obviously this is something you were born with, but your experience growing up with a facial difference?
Yeah, growing up with a facial difference, it's challenging in its own way. It's something being on your face, you just can't quite hide that too much. You can't get away with it. So it was a very, it was a dance for a while through my childhood of wanting to, be authentically me while also wanting to fit in. Wanting to show my face, wanting to hide it. So, I created a lot of habits and mannerisms to not really look at people in the eyes, talking to them, kind of shying away from my left side of the face where my birthmark is, putting myself in situations where I would be more noticed, things like that. But, that dance was really, it was emotionally challenging. It was a bit of a roller coaster. And, when you have to limit yourself, no one feels great. You can't really thrive in that type of environment. And I reached a threshold, I think in high school, when I was like, this isn't just, I don't feel like I can grow this way. And that's when I started wearing less makeup. It became less foundation and maybe like a little powder. And then it was after high school, and then it was no makeup. And then I started this Instagram. And before then I had no thought. There was no the idea of highlighting it just did not even exist in my world. Like it didn't even exist in the ether. So that didn't start happening until I started the Instagram at around 23. So it's been a huge challenge, and fighting stereotypes and stigmas at the same time. With how I see my birthmark now, it's just been the most beautiful blessing that I can imagine. I really can't imagine who I would be without it. And the mission that it's put me on at this point, the message that I feel so compelled to tell, and create representation and awareness in the way that I want to do it. It's incredibly fulfilling, and it's so much fun. And I don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't a birthmark advocate. And so now I'm extremely grateful to be different and to be part of that part of the group. But it took a while to get there. And I think anybody like yourself who is physically different, whether it's on the face or not, it's to feel alienated, to not feel heard, understood, seen in any of those capacities, it is extremely challenging. And that desire to feel relatable, I think, is just a human right, I think. And when you don't feel that, it can really make any situation within your life feel heavier and feel darker and not feel as hopeful. And I think fighting those feelings, especially as a child, consistently, it can really, I think do a number on somebody and their mindset and their perspective in life. But most of the people that I've met who are also physically different, or who've had, similar challenges, are just also some of the most beautiful people, some of the strongest, some of the most sympathetic, empathetic, and just some of the most beautiful people that I've met. So I'm really not, I'm very proud now, but it's been a journey to get there.
Definitely. And thanks for sharing all of that with us. I can definitely relate to that because I was burned when I was 3. So, growing up, and I do have a small facial difference, even though I feel like blends in with my skin now. But when I was younger and it was red, obviously it stood out a little bit more. So, I can totally relate to that kind of growing up and growing into your confidence. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? Whether, I'm sure you were teased and bullied in school growing up. And that's something that we hear from children of, children burn survivors or their parents and caregivers, like reaching out to ask like what they can do to support, their child. So I'd love to maybe if you could talk a little bit more about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, my experience growing up with the support was huge. I mean, it really came from my family. They were extremely, extremely supportive, and, providing information with, lasers, but without putting their opinions on it. They were very neutral in just, educating. And I think education is a really big thing. You want to educate them as quickly as possible so that they have an understanding of what they are, who they are, what they're dealing with, how they stand out. And I think it's important for them to know that they are different and how special that is. What we deal with outside of the household is extremely different. The lack of education from others is, I mean, across the board, no matter what your physical difference is. So educating your child, and even if your child doesn't have a physical difference, just to let them know that there are physical differences out there, what disabilities are, and to look at them in a way that our society doesn't project in a negative way, in a fearful way. How to teach your kid to approach, to ask is really big. I even know a lot of adults that could still learn that. How to answer those questions when kids ask, that's really important, because your child is going to, I mean, their entire life they will be asked by children and adults, what is that? And a lot of the times they will be asked in ways that are not going to feel very welcoming or very respectful or supportive. And my mom, she was learning that too, as it was happening. She was learning how to deal with people coming up to her of like, how dare you hit your child, just that So just being able to understand that you're always going to be fighting stigmas and stereotypes, and children can understand that. Um, and how to respond to that is going to be really, really beneficial, because at some point that becomes a survival thing. And I remember as a child practicing responses in the mirror, so that, like,
Mhm.
memorizing them, having like things in my roster that I could just pull out when moments happened. Because when moments happen, a lot of times your emotions are heightened. You can be in fight or flight, your adrenaline can go, and you may not say anything, you may forget, you may feel flustered. So having practiced responses, and even a range, ones that
Yep.
are very kind, and maybe ones that are a little more spicy. I'm a fan of having spicy responses. I think they're needed, because the spectrum of how people invade your space is vast.
Yep.
Um, but that was a huge shock for me, and it took me a long time to really understand that there really isn't boundaries from
Mhm.
people at whatever age I was, and it was coming from kids and adults. And so I think learning that earlier would have been helpful. But um the I think having that education is the most important in the beginning, because that makes it a much easier segue to start focusing on how different is cool, how different is unique, and how you can start creating a perspective that there's strength there, and that
Mhm.
normal is not necessarily what needs to be had or looked like to have a healthy and beautiful, successful life. Um, but that would be my next biggest thing, is like, you teach them what all of this is, how to respond, how to deal with it, and start creating a shift in mindset of how cool this is, and how cool it is to be different and to stand out. And I think to do that, you need to just completely, like, shove as much representation and awareness of what the physical difference is to them, whether it's other advocates on Instagram,
Mhm.
where they're showing their difference in a very positive and empowering light. Um, Seeing people who look like them, who are successful in whatever way that is. Start having books. There's so many books that are coming out now in the physically
Mhm.
different worlds. Like, I had someone, a mom message me, and she said that she brings a birthmark book with her to her school. And so, like, especially on when her new first day of school, so she brings it with her to, like, help teach her class, like, this is what my birthmark is, and here's a book about it. And it's a great conversation starter. And there's usually a really big shift in the kids when you just come to them and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what it is. It's not contagious. I was born with it. If you have any questions, just let me know. And the shift is very, very different. But yeah, there's just so many things I feel like I could list, but
Yeah.
education, and then just shifting the mindset of a way of these stereotypes and stigmas to create your own powerful story. Mine is like my difference is my superpower, and like that, and I really do truly feel that. But it gets me so far with whenever there's, any challenge, any stereotype that kind of comes my way,
Mhm.
because that's always just going to be part of our world, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I mean, I loved having a spicy response. I
Yeah.
might have to practice mine. We have a tool that we teach survivors called Rehearse Your Response, and it's
Oh,
exactly what you were saying.
yeah.
Practicing, a response for when you want to talk more about it, and then times where you don't want to share, and you don't have to
Hmm.
share.
Right.
But I do love the spicy response. I may have to work on mine a little bit.
Yeah, like, I don't want to speak for all of us, but like, I've got a lot of suppressed anger I'm still working through. So
Mhm.
yeah, spiciness is gonna happen. Like,
Yes.
it's gonna happen.
No, I like that. It's funny. Growing up, I felt like I was really good at my response, and I still have it like memorized, like my 3 second
Yeah.
answer to about my burns. But it's funny because once I was an adult working, like I guess I assumed, and this is the wrong thing. I assumed that, oh, I'm an adult now. Like, I'm not a kid. I won't really have those questions asked anymore because
Right.
we're adults. We know better. And there's nothing wrong with asking as long as you do it in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
But I was at the grocery store one time and I can't remember the comment the lady made, but she caught me so off guard. And I was like, I like froze because I hadn't practiced. I hadn't really talked about it. Like all of my friends, my family, like my community, I feel like everyone already knew. So I was like, oh, I don't know. Everyone knows. I didn't have to practice anymore. So I could have used a spicy response for her for sure.
Yeah, but I get what you mean. I mean, like, we still get surprised by the level of ignorance, and like that's different than just naturally very curiosity and like, yeah, respectfully asking. That's
Mhm.
very, very different. But yeah, the ignorance from people is sometimes shocking, where I'm have to like really take a second, be like, is this really happening right now? Are you really thinking like, did those words really come out of your mouth? They did. Okay. All right. We're processing.
Yep.
Okay.
No, it is crazy. I want to talk about one other thing you mentioned too, which I love is how the mom and her daughter kind of went into the school with the book and,
Yeah.
started the conversation on their own, which
Mhm.
I think is really helpful, especially for kids. Not waiting until the questions come, but
Yeah.
being upfront and approaching it. And whether, you have a visible difference on your face, on your body, or if it's a hidden scar, um,
Mhm.
just sometimes approaching it, upfront on your own in your own terms will kind of help guide that conversation to a better conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like that.
Yeah, and it's that shift that I was telling you about. That's something that I personally experienced too. My growing up, we moved so much, so I was constantly bouncing around from different schools. And one year, man, I was like, I think I bounced around to 3 different schools in 3 different cities. And so just doing that introduction of reintroducing myself and just going through that whole thing, it was like daunting, and it was
Mhm.
so much. And at that point where I just was doing it so many times, where I was just like, you know what, this is just, screw this. So it was like my new day at a class, and I went up to the teacher, and I was really annoyed too. Like, it wasn't coming from, I'm gonna be really brave. Like, I was annoyed. And so I went up to the teacher, and I was like, can I just introduce myself? Just get this over with. And she was like really surprised. And she, oh yeah, of course, absolutely. And so she let me go in front, and I was just like, hi, I'm Paige. Yeah, I wasn't excited at all. I was like, this is a birthmark. Was born with it. I was like, it's not contagious, because everyone thought it was contagious. It was so annoying. That was my most annoying thing.
I bet.
And so I said that really like really annoyingly. And I was like, it's, I was born with it. If you have any questions, just ask me. And so I sat back down. But yeah, the shift from that was so incredibly different than what I was used to, and entering a new class and just
Mhm.
not really saying anything, and just letting the teacher just, hi, this
Yep.
is Paige, she's new, and let everyone say hi. And that was it.
Yep.
Um, you're still going to have your people that are going to have their reactions regardless of you introduce yourself or not. But the curiosity and it was just so much more positive. And it was so much more, oh, like I have something I was born with. And
Mhm.
it maybe, it was very small in their leg. But again, it brought up conversations and permission, positive permission that
Yep.
I did not receive before. And that was I mean, I'll never forget that, because that definitely started to change my mindset a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So earlier you had mentioned too, about wearing less and less makeup as you grew up. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? And, when, in my experience on my own journey, I remember one time in a hospital, I was there for like a routine checkup for my burns, and they had people there who were like helping us learn how to like wear makeup. And at the time, it to me was too much of like, let's disguise your makeup
Yeah.
or your scars, excuse me. Like, let's hide them with makeup. And I had a very negative reaction to that. I mean, I love makeup in
Hmm.
other forms, but growing up, I didn't really cover up my facial scar because I guess I just had that like negative perception of it. But I would love, for you to share, like, was that something you kind of did on your own because you wanted to cover it, and those steps you took to not wearing any, or enhancing it beautifully and not covering it up per se?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was hunting and begging my mom for makeup. I was like, cover this thing. I wanted this thing gone. I wanted as many laser surgeries as possible. Like, I mean, I
Mhm.
hated those laser surgeries, but like, I mean, I had fantasies of like cutting it off. Like, I mean, just the whole thing.
Mhm.
Photos, it was, I very much wanted powder on my birthmark and stuff like that. And so my mom was, bless her heart, she was just doing what I was asking. She
Yep.
definitely wanted, my birthmark to just be out there in the world. And then I remember in middle school, I mean, I was a tomboy too, so like I didn't actually wear makeup except for photos up until middle school when my mom let me started to wear makeup.
Mhm.
And I remember doing like the really thick foundation, the stuff that covered up tattoos, because I was like,
Mhm.
again, I want to look like as normal as possible. But it didn't last too long because being in Vegas, PE in the heat outside, so I
Mhm.
literally started to look like a melting Barbie doll. And I was like, well, this even looks worse. So can't do that. And so I found a compromise, but like, yeah, I wore foundation heavily, I think until maybe sophomore year of high school that I just started to kind of put powder on it, where you could really start to see it if you were close up.
Mhm.
But then I think started then was when I really started to like not wear makeup going out. I'd usually just at least put a little bit of powder on. And I think it was a mix between, still being very insecure, but also just not wanting to deal with the stuff
Mhm.
outside, like it felt, and I remember this feeling very consistently anytime going outside of the house. It felt like I had to put like a knight in armor suit
Mhm.
on, because that's what I felt like the defense and the fight was every single time, with the stares and the questions and just the inappropriate and invasiveness. And sometimes you just don't want to deal with that.
Yep.
Sometimes you just want to go to the grocery store and just not be stared at,
Yep.
and not have someone invade your space. Um, so I think it was, a mix between both of those things. But when I moved out to LA, I had the healthiest relationship with my birthmark at the time, and wasn't really wearing makeup except like for work and stuff.
Mhm.
And it was funny. I was actually going through my photos because I started the Instagram when I was 23, and again, like I didn't have any idea of like, oh, you should highlight this. You should like make it more accentuated and do all this stuff, because that was just not even in the ether. I didn't even know that was like could be a thing. But the first few years that I started doing that, because that was the very first time that I was even looking at my birthmark that way. So when I first started highlighting it in these different ways, it still took me a few years to like, I was looking back at photos and I was still covering up my birthmark a little bit um, on set and like at work.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, how interesting. So it was very much a progression. I think maybe trying to like do math right now. We're 2024. So probably at around like 2017, 2018 was when I really consistently was like, if we're doing anything to this, it's only to highlight it. Um, and now I can't, I mean, like, I can't even look at it any other way. I can't
Yeah.
go back any like way at all. Like, it's just so cool. I was just like, I can't believe I didn't even think about this when I was younger. Like, the things I would have done, how it would have shifted as,
Mhm.
as a child. Now it just feels like the world's my oyster. And there's just like, I'm like, anything that could stick, I'm like, we'll figure it out. Let's just put it on our face.
Yeah.
I've grabbed flowers outside of my yard and just like done like a
Oh,
flower
yeah.
look. Like, it's so much fun now. Like, it's just the world it's just completely changed and open, and it's just so much fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we'll make sure we have your Instagram linked in our show's description, and that's Flawless Effect. And you're on TikTok as well, I
Yeah.
believe. So make sure you check out Paige's page. If you, sorry, I was like, I guess it
Yeah.
is Paige.
Yeah.
On if you haven't already, I love your makeup and everything you've done.
Thank
It's
you.
interesting because it's like you went from covering it up to like just accepting it and living with it, and now it's like, oh no, I'm going to highlight this and make sure you all see my birthmark.
Yeah. Now it's like my trademark and my brand. And like, I don't talk about anything else on my Instagram. So like, totally fair if anybody gets annoyed about that stuff. But like, that's all that it is now, which is so much fun.
I love it. So what really inspired you to start that Instagram page and start, like we said, highlighting your birthmark?
Yeah, being rejected by all these casting directors here in LA. That's
Mhm.
what got me to start the Instagram. Because when I first moved out here, I mean, since I was little, I always wanted to be a filmmaker and in front of the camera and a producer and all that stuff and be a representation for someone who looked like me. And that was very much the goal when I moved out here to LA. Before I moved out here, I was already working, as crew, as production coordinator, production manager, and and then yeah, I did the whole acting thing when I moved out here. I tried to get the agent and the managers, did all the auditions, got the headshots. Headshots went covered my birthmark.
Mhm.
So it was still, because it was 2014 when I moved out here, so it was still very much in that figuring out, healing who I am process. And um, yeah, I learned very quickly that I'm just gonna have to make my own stuff and just, Hollywood is, they were very confused of why I was coming into a casting that I didn't have, a birthmark or scar or burn called out in the script. I remember there was one actual audition that I had. It was for, I believe it was a Verizon commercial, and they were specifically calling out physically different and disabled. And they actually had birthmark on the casting call. And I was like, oh, I was like, I got this. I was like, excuse me. And I show up to the casting call, and no one there looked remotely different. There was no physical difference, no disability, no even people of color. There was nothing there. I crushed it, by the way. I mean, let's be real.
I'm sure you did.
I let's be real. And didn't get a call back. And I just, at that point, I was just, I was having managers and agents just telling me, well, you're too distracting in the back, and you're like, we don't even know where to put you in
Mhm.
the front. So it was just like, okay, clearly I have to make my own stuff.
Mhm.
So with through a lot of frustration and anger, I was like, well, I can't make a film overnight. Or at least I don't want to. But I can start photography. Like I can take photos. I know how to do that. I learned how to do, some Photoshop and some very simple like overlay stuff to be able to put cool stuff within the birthmark. And so I was like, yeah, let's just try it. So I just started the Instagram. The first things that I started doing were creating themed photo shoots. So they were like much more like production type things, and
Yeah.
had no idea what I was doing. It was not very consistent with how much I was posting. I even took like 2 years off. Um, and then like I just something I had a threshold. I reached my threshold of like not doing this, I don't know, just like doing this full time, like being confident and comfortable as like a birthmark advocate and creating representation and awareness. And September of 2022 is when I just really turned a corner, and I got over myself, and I was like, I don't we're gonna do this thing, and we're gonna do it full time, and we're gonna make it happen. And it's just, yeah, it's just been like the coolest adventure of going from absolutely hating my birthmark, wanting it to be like cut off, to
Mhm.
now this is like my brand. And I want, everyone to know about birthmarks and just how beautiful they are. And I want to see people who look like me on TV and on
Mhm.
magazines and on billboards. And there's over 700 million people with birthmarks,
Mhm.
24 million people with port wine stains. Like that is a substantial amount of people who do not have any representation.
Mhm.
So I'm ready to see that, and I'm ready to see birthmarks highlighted. It's just, and not even birthmarks. Like that's been part of such like the beautiful journey of this is it's anything physically different.
Mhm.
I have a good friend of mine who also has burn scars from her waist down, like completely waist down. And she's a music artist, and we're designing for her next music video right now. We're designing this whole look where she has like this really high slit dress. And so you see all of her legs, and we're doing like this whole glittery galaxy, like waterfall highlight. And I'm just
Oh, I
like
love
so
that.
excited. Yeah. Just like, oh, the mind is just, with anything different now, I'm like, oh, like glitter there, paint
Mhm.
there, sparkle there. So it's, um, yeah, it's just shifted just magically.
I love that. That's amazing. So have you, you talked a little about, for example, that commercial that specifically asked for, a birthmark
Mhm.
and you never heard back. Have you seen a positive shift or even a negative shift in the film industry. And I guess just over the past few years, I feel like we were making small strides in the right direction. We're nowhere near where we should be, but have you seen a shift?
Yes and no. I think so. I'm just now starting to get more involved in panels and groups that are specifically talking about this, and people who are much more involved in the diversity aspect in Hollywood or in media and film. I will say though that the word diversity and inclusion doesn't, like, the focus really isn't on physically different still. It's on disability right now. Before that, it was on, LGBTQ and more of like ethnicity diversity, and maybe ageism a little bit. But now the next big push is going to be disability. So physically different still really isn't on the radar for film and TV, for any type of media inclusion, or even like discrimination, acts within workplace or education. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to be able to bring, within these discussions, because they don't have anybody within our physically different realm, which is, obviously so diverse, with what that includes. But like, for example, I went to a diversity panel recently, and it was specifically on disability. Just that is it. Like it's not on also physically different. And so I started talking to some of those people, and they were like, oh, you know what? Like we don't have anybody that is on our board that can actually speak about that kind of stuff. So it's like they don't know. It's still so new. So I'm hoping that will be part of the disability push. But it still might be like maybe right after the disability push. So we still have a long way to go, because as we see, this stuff just takes so long, and the risk factor with doing new outreach, new audience, new type of market, they're just still so risk adverse with it. And it's like we have to make our own, and that ends up coming from private funding. And that just makes it all the more challenging to be able to get it out there, unfortunately. But I think it's slowly getting there.
Yeah, we talk about this topic a lot, on the podcast and off the podcast with our community of, it's like, I guess it just doesn't make sense to any of us. Like, why wouldn't you just include us? Like, why are we viewed as, like you said, you're too distracting in the front or in the back, and we don't know what to do with you in the front? Like, it's just mind blowing to me that this is still an issue. It's good, definitely, like you said, like there has been progress in other areas, but certainly, different physical differences is still not quite there, unless it's art of like special effects makeup in a negative spotlight,
right? Which is another push that we're trying to get away from with Face Equality International, and their specific petition against Hollywood with using physical differences to be very villainous, and which I think they started like a Hollywood task force. I think they changed the name of it, which I just started to join. But and some of the people on these panels that I talked to, they're really trying to make a huge initiative with behind the scenes diversity with disability and physically different. And I think some of like the main arguments from, these executives who can make these decisions, like, yeah, I think it's just, lack of education. I think that's a big one. Their mindsets are very limited. We're dealing with a lot of old, outdated mindsets. And money, they end up thinking that, like, especially disability is going to cost more money, because now we're going to have to add all of these things to be able to accommodate them. And it's like, that's not necessarily true. And like, yeah, there may be some things that have to be made to accommodate, but it's like, we end up having to do that for everybody, like even like for A-listers, like what would be any different? But one of the things they're trying to do is like, they actually trying to include that in the budget already, like fiscally, like before, that are like locked in, so that like there's no question of, no, you do have the money, because it was already in the budget. So it's a big dance. but that's why we got to make our own. And I'm in the process of it. I'm developing a few features right now. And it won't just be, birthmarks included. We're going to be having different physical, different and disability involved. And yeah, just really, really excited about that. But there are people out there. There's just, gotta find them.
Yep, definitely, definitely. Well, you mentioned again Face Equality International, and as I said at the beginning, it is Face Equality Week. So we're so excited to be celebrating this week along with FEI. And Paige, I know you are one of the newest ambassadors for FEI. So why are you excited about partnering with Face Equality International?
I think they're just great. I mean, they're just a wonderful organization. The people behind it are just genuinely beautiful people. And what I love so much about their initiative is, just really working on human rights. It's not just so much of a
Mm-hmm.
place for resource and try to empower and to create some awareness. Like they're in politics working on discrimination policies, which I have a huge desire for, and there is such a need for. So the fact that these beautiful people are even working on that's, I don't think a lot of people even have any type of focus on, is really, really beautiful. The people that they support, that they rally for, are just super invaluable. And yeah, and I really love the initiative that put on your My Face is a Masterpiece. It's like, very much in line with what my journey has been with what I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing with my birthmark and my face. And it's it's exactly with what I think the world needs to hear, needs to see, how they need to be empowered and inspired. And yeah, I just love everything that they're doing over there, and their big picture too. And like I said, like their petition against Hollywood, and like
Mm-hmm.
and with the villainous physical different looks, and I just everything that they're about. I'm like, yes, this is what we need. This is the type of fight that we need, and the energy. And yeah, their long-term goals for the facial different community is exactly what we need. And I'm excited for to see let's see what happens. I mean, I feel like they're a force. They're a big force.
They really are. The FEI team is amazing at what they do. And like you said, yes, they provide resources and support to those with facial differences, but they're also working behind the scenes on so many different initiatives. And like you said, unfortunately, things take a really long time. So it may not be as easy as just one little thing, but that's why weeks like this week for Face Equality Week, it's so important to advocate for facial differences, but specifically for Phoenix Society, all visible and hidden differences. It would be nice if thinking of like Hollywood on a movie, just even small scars that they don't have to be highlighted, they don't have to be talked about, they're just there because they're a part of our world and a part of life. So if you are looking for more ways to get involved, we'll include FEI's information down below. Make sure you follow them, especially this week. They're pushing out so many great, resources, articles, videos. We have a fun, I guess, I don't know, like photo op you can do where you can hold your photo like as a frame for My Face is a Masterpiece, or my body is a masterpiece. It's even so much more than that. So
Yeah, definitely.
I really love this year's theme. And like I said, we'll make sure we have all their links down below. But, aside from, like I said, you're a new ambassador for them, you're excited to partner with them. What are some things you're hoping to achieve alongside FEI?
Oh man, how much time you got? I mean, the list is just getting bigger and bigger. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd love to bring FEI in everything that I do. I mean, some of the goals that I personally have that I'm sure they'll be involved into some capacity is we're working on a birthmark Barbie, doing a pitch to
Love that.
Mattel, but we'll be strategic in pitching, really heavily pitching that with once we have a green light on our first feature that I'll be acting in. And we've got a children's birthmark book in the works this week, or not this week, but just this year in general. And one of the things I'll be talking EFI is, not just having it on birthmarks, a bunch of different facial differences. I mean, yeah, I want to get really involved in bringing some of their discrimination policy within California. I know it goes by per state.
Mhm.
So start kind of bringing those initiatives here, bringing some kind of educational workshop within schools, where we can educate on disabilities and physical differences. And we do like a highlight workshop, where we bring in some fun stuff and we can all pick the thing that's different about us and then we highlight it together. Um, and I mean, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like the start of it. But within so many like, there's so many collaborations that we could do. But those are some of the bigger projects that are within the wheelhouse within the next year.
That's amazing. I love the idea of the Barbie, and
Oh
because
yeah,
those are, just like toys that kids play with that you can just start introducing, young children to differences without
hmm
having to like sit down and have a conversation with it, which is important, but it doesn't
yeah,
always have to be the first, entry point. If that's just something that everyone grows up seeing, and that
yeah.
goes back to why Hollywood and media representation is so important. But if we just normalize it, then yeah, we'll still get questions. You're still going to get, rude comments, but it'll be a general, just more acceptance as a whole.
Right.
If
Well,
it's
people
something
will
that's
have a positive reference.
Mhm.
They can see a birthmark Barbie, and without fully understanding the scope, it's like they're gonna reference that probably before they reference you as Scarface or Freddy
Yep.
Krueger, which is like, some of the comments that I get. And it's
Yep.
I like, I can be offended all I want, but like there's what other reference? I mean, it's not even an accurate representation, unfortunately, but it's yeah, it's a huge impact, just something as small as that. I mean, can you even imagine, like, instead of that little girl bringing in a book on at school, she's bringing in a birthmark Barbie that looks like her?
Mhm.
Like, how cool is that? Like, I would have been probably the most popular kid in school if I had a Barbie that looked like me. Everyone would have been so jealous.
Mhm.
um so yeah, it's things like that that just make the biggest difference. And it's going to happen. So whether Mattel's part of it or not, a birthmark doll will be happening.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, like I mentioned a few times, this year's theme is "My face is a masterpiece." So what does that, tagline mean to you?
Um, yeah, I love that tagline. It's such an empowering way to just to view something that you did not have a loving relationship with before.
Mhm.
It's just a really powerful um just reminder, and I think reassurance of something that we all forgotten. Regardless of how different your face is, we are all unique in our own individual way. And I think if we all did see our face as a masterpiece, our body as a masterpiece, that we would have a lot less hate in this world. And I know that's a big general statement with a lot going on in the world these days, but it's having that type of confidence and just peace
Mhm.
with just you authentically. You are a different person. You think differently, your actions are different. The way that you want to show up to the world, the way that you want to support others, it is all so different.
Mhm.
And even if that, like, that doesn't extend to other people, just that feeling alone in yourself, that really believing that, like, you are a masterpiece. I think that's just part of the birthright of being a human being. I think, like, that really is true. Like, the
Mhm.
fact that we are all so beautifully different, that is art. And my face is a masterpiece. Seeing and shifting that mindset of my face as art is incredibly powerful and
Mhm.
effective. I think it's a tool. It's a beautiful thought, mind shifting tool that
Mhm.
you could even use as an affirmation, a daily affirmation.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's, I even look at it as just the self-love component behind it. And, whether you have scars, visible, or not, or, no scars in terms of birthmarks or burns or whatever it may be, that idea of my face is a masterpiece, my body is a masterpiece is something we can all relate to. And, we all have to love ourselves a little bit more and give, our bodies the love it deserves.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on our time here, and we do have 2 final questions I have to ask you. But before we get there, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners today?
Oh man, I mean, yeah, if we want to just add on to like the positive affirmations and the slogans or the phrases, just know that your difference, whatever it is, it really is your superpower. The amount of strength that I have found since highlighting my difference, like I can't even really describe it in words because it kind of seems silly that like there's even like that much like power that I've found now that I've like highlighted this. But it really does feel like I've unlocked another level of myself and like peace within myself. And so I highly recommend to see your difference that way as well.
It's so beautiful. I love it. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So, like you said, we always close out by asking our guests 2 final questions. So, our first one, what is something that you would want, burn survivors or, those with, birthmarks? What's one piece of advice you'd want them to know?
Oh, hmm. Um, I mean, it would definitely be, I think, just along the lines of that, of, finding that power of being different. Because I can't speak for, actual uh, uh, burn survivors, but I would say decorate it.
I love it.
Just decorate it. Decorate it as little, as much as you want. Don't even need to post about it. Don't even need to go out in the world with it. It could just be you at home, by yourself, maybe with a friend. Maybe start very intimately and just highlight it, and just start looking at your difference that way. And then maybe challenge yourself and do it, like, if you have a festival, a fun event that maybe that authentically could work. Highlight it
Yeah.
and see how you feel, see how people react to it. I've had a few people who've done that and reported back to me where I've gone to like this concert or something like that, and they had nothing but beautiful, positive reviews and responses, and they could not wait till they did it again. So that would be my advice.
No, that's awesome. I love how you will outline your birthmark sometimes and body glitter. There's so many fun like ways to use makeup and like special effects, I guess,
Yes,
to highlight it. And hey, it's festival season. So now it's like you
exactly.
have no reason not to try right now.
Exactly. I mean, you never need permission to ever stand out how you want to stand out. But yeah, festivals are like the perfect place to go and explore and put
Try.
rhinestones and face sticker stuff all over. I love doing because those are so easy and those are so much fun. Yeah, go crazy. Like that is I think you'll be surprised with how you'll feel after.
And if you want, this week, it's the perfect time. Take a pic of yourself, share it on
Mhm.
social with my face is a masterpiece or my body's a masterpiece. And yeah, it could be a really fun way to get
Yeah.
involved in the week.
Yeah. It'd be a fun personal challenge for sure.
Yes, I love it. Well, our final question today, it is our Phoenix partner question, which today is sponsored by Telgian, an organization dedicated to saving lives through innovative fire prevention and life safety solutions is. So their question is, what is one thing that brings a smile to your face no matter how tough your day has been?
Oh, I'm like Scooby-Doo or food.
Chai tea latte?
Yeah. Snacks. I'm a bit on the fries. Uh, I mean, if we just kind of want to keep it within like this world, any comment that I get or message that I get of someone seeing my Instagram for the first time,
Mhm.
seeing someone who looked like them for the first time, or just the impact that it has made on them, or the fact that they now kind of see their birthmark differently, or that they like are really proud of it now than they were before. Those are, the things that just put huge smiles on my face, sometimes make me cry. They just make it all absolutely worth it. And yeah, I think those are things that I hold very, very dear and are very impactful to me.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you'll get some more positive comments from first-time visitors after our survivors are listening to the podcast today. So,
Yeah.
like I said, make sure you follow Paige on Instagram and TikTok. We'll have those linked below. Trust me, she creates beautiful, beautiful posts. So you want to give her a
Thank you.
follow. Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much, Paige, for joining us for Face Equality Week. I'm so happy you could come on the podcast. I love everything you're doing. So keep it
Thank
up
you.
and we'll be following along for sure.
All right, sounds amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.